Welcome to the Why on Earth Community's Stewardship and Sustainability podcast series. Today we have the opportunity to visit with Kimba Arem. Hi Kimba.
Hi.
It's so nice to be with you.
Wonderful to have you here.
So we are in Kimba's studio and we're going to be talking about healing and sound and water. And Kimba's going to also demonstrate some of these amazing and really unique instruments that she works with. Before we dive into all of that, let me give you a little bit of Kimba's background. Kimba is an international performer and recording artist, sound engineer, molecular biologist, classically trained in piano and flute, a subtle energy therapist, and full-time spiritual seeker since her transformational wake-up call, a near-death experience in 1992. One major realization given to her was the awareness that the basis of everything is essentially vibration. Soon after that event, while attending graduate school studying Taoist acupuncture and herbs, she was introduced to the ancient idea of using sound as medicine, which combined her passion for music with service to others. She has now been practicing music therapy and various other subtle energy modalities for over 20 years. In addition to this, Kimba has actively been involved in shamanic practices from around the world since 1994. She incorporates tapping into harmonizing energies beyond the 5 main senses into her productions and therapy work, which has involved individual sound sessions, workshops, group sound journeys, scoring, the production of 13 albums, and a movie called Secret of Water. Kimba co-founded and is president of an integral health clinic, Radiance Health, which incorporates both Western and complementary medicine. She is dedicated to educating and assisting the planet in gentle awakening and transformation through sacred sound and vibrational medicine. And I might also point out, among all of these beautiful things that you've produced include this album that you co-created, Kimba, with Dr. Andrew Weil, called Self-Healing with Sound and Music. And I am so excited that we have this opportunity to visit with you and have a bit of sound experience with you. And before diving into this rich set of topics, I want to ask Kimba, can you share with us a bit about this near-death experience and why that was so pivotal for you?
That's a really huge topic. So I'll just kind of go to the essence of how it applies to our topic today. But so my background was science. In college at least. You know, I grew up a nature lover, a music lover. I was trained in classical piano and silver flute. But then as I got older, I didn't see music, even though it was my heart, it was natural talent, it was my passion. But I didn't like being in front of people. Even today, it's not my thing, although Spirit had a different plan for my life. I don't seek to be on stage or perform or anything. Music was always my medicine. But I only knew music as, well, you get up on stage and you perform and you entertain people. And that's what I was doing growing up in concerts and piano recitals, but I could not see doing that my whole life. I'm not like that kind of person that gets fueled by that. So I decided that, you know, my father was a doctor, that I'm going to go to medical school, but I love nature, so I studied molecular biology was kind of my major in college, but it wasn't, I didn't realize that I had fallen asleep to my life's purpose slowly, which I think happens to most of us in the culture and the times we live in. In 1992, I was about to graduate. Top of my class, honors, molecular biology, minor math and physics, pre-med, going to enter medical school, and I had a big wake-up call. This is a whole story in itself, actually, what happened in this near-death experience. I did not know at the time what it was because I had no spiritual lingo no community, no references for this, what happened to me. I started to read voraciously after that, like a few books a week on all these different topics, and got into the Castaneda material, and anything I could find out was spiritually oriented. But I read Raymond Moody's book called Life After Life, and every single, so he was cataloging near-death experiences of people, thousands of people, and they all had similar themes. Every single thing he touched upon happened in my experience, except there was a few more things that he didn't talk about. We all get the life review. That's a very common theme in people who have had these experiences, where you see all of your life and the perfection of it and everything that brought you to this moment, and yourself outside of time, really. It's you don't see it like a movie, you see it like your life is an object. But it's already, in a certain timeline, your future and your past are kind of determined. But from the moment you're in, you can change your past and your future. Kind of hard to describe, but that's what I was shown. So I was actually shown my preview of how my life would end. The age. I was going to die at 42. I'm now 40, almost 48, in a couple of weeks. But so I definitely changed my timeline. And I was given my prognosis, which was Hodgkin's lymphoma. I had no idea what it was. I had not gone to medical school yet. And I didn't end up going to medical school. But it turns out it was a cancer of the lymph nodes. I had to look it up. And this was before internet, so I had to get a book on medical diagnoses. So, but the essence of this experience was I came back basically a baby again. I feel that this is where we come from, the place when we are born and when we die, we go to a realm that if we tap back into it sometime in our life, it's like starting over, because you remember and you see things outside of time, you see yourself, you see the perfection. You basically, as I see it, enter the mind of the creator. We are all the creator. And then this is a fractal, kind of layers down version of the fractal, that each of our lives is like the cell in the body of Brahma. The Vedas in India would refer to the creator as this being, and we're each a part of it. I got an experience of that. It's not a theoretical. It was like, we are all God. But every one of us, not just some of us, so that's an important key. It's very humbling. But because I was a baby, I knew I wasn't going to go to medical school. However, I was shown that was going to lead me in the path that was not only would be an early death, but not following now I have a word called Dharma, after studying the Buddhist culture, which I feel very connected to as well, but that we have a life's purpose. Every cell in our body has a function, and we are all meant to fulfill whatever that function is. And if you follow your heart, you follow your passion, then you are fulfilling your purpose in life. And I had no idea what that was, because I had gotten into this mindset, my mind, thinking I was supposed to be something. But it wasn't really my true gift, which I always loved music. But I had no idea how to make that my livelihood, So I was like a baby. However, this instrument entered my life called the Didgeridoo. This was in 1993. The near death happened in 1992. I was about to graduate, and I knew I had to finish college, but I didn't know why. And because I was still not in my body it took about 4 years after this near death to get really grounded back in reality. But here I am, I gotta graduate. Spirits, or my higher self was saying, you gotta graduate. So I'm walking to organic chemistry, right? Going like, why am I here? I'm not gonna be a doctor. I'm not gonna use this degree for anything. I'm melting in trees as I walk to class. Like, I get sucked into every tree that I walk by and start to just commune with it. It was like a magnet. It's this phenomenon that happened for a few months. So I'm walking to organic chemistry, and I see a lady lying down, sitting in the grass with this instrument lying next to her. I was magnetically drawn to it, and I went up to her and I said, "What is that? Please play it for me." And she said, "It's called a dream pipe." Her partner, who was making those out of the local cactus in Arizona, Alan Shockley. And she played this instrument. I never heard one before, never seen one. And that sound was a key, literally a key, like in musical terms, like it unlocked something. I heard that sound, and I'm like, I need one now. This is the only thing really that makes sense to me. And that was why I needed to continue my college degree, so I could meet her and meet this instrument.
Yes.
And plus there's other reasons for that fractal of the degree. But this instrument turned out to be my guide and my teacher, and it still is. This is 27 years later. I just played that instrument. I played it all the time. That sound, it connected me back to this place that I went in my near-death experience. And that was where I was just like, how do I get back there? People who also have near-death experiences, it's very difficult to come back into this world. And you understand you're in a realm of death, decay. Everything you love, everyone you love, your own body will fall away and decay. It's not an immortal realm. It's a very time-limited, at least the time we live in on the planet. And what you tap into is the part of you that doesn't decay, that is timeless, that is ecstatic. It's really the ultimate addiction, I could say. Every addict is seeking that state.
Carl Jung spoke about that a fair bit, actually. Super interesting. Yeah. Okay.
I love his work.
Yes.
And we're all tapping into the same piece of the fractal.
Yeah.
So when I play the didgeridoo, I realized, number one, that I don't breathe. And when I moved to Hawaii later, I learned that haole is the haole, they say, but it's haole is a Hawaiian word, and it means without breath. And that's what white people were called. And I definitely noticed in the culture that we live in, we do not breathe. And every culture around the world, except English, the language refers to breath and spirit are the same word.
Right.
And in English, they're separated out. And so what I realized is, like, I'm not breathing. Therefore, I'm not really bringing my full spirit. I'm not incarnating fully. I'm still kind of like halfway out of my physical form. Yeah. And I think there's a lot of problems with that, not only level of consciousness, but health-wise.
Absolutely.
And, we need to, and so the didgeridoo became my teacher. Not only is the ultimate pranayama, how to, the circular breathing. It took me about a week to get circular breathing, but about 4 weeks where it was effortless. 4 years, I'm sorry. 4 years of really playing it all the time, where circular breathing became, but I didn't care. I just needed to make this sound. Yeah.
Maybe some of our audience may not be entirely familiar with circular breathing, and I actually, as I was sharing with you previously, have played some didgeridoo. Yeah. And that whole process of being able to continuously make sound with our breath is so profound. It's so magical. I love your comment too about the language, the etymological relationship between what we call spirit and what we call breath. Of course, the Latin roots, spirit, inspiration, aspiration, perspiration, spiritus, there's a great inspire, right? The spirit coming into us. And then in some of the Proto-Indo-European language roots, we find this Atmos, Atmen, Brahman in India, and Atmos, atmosphere through the Greek. Atmen is to breathe in German. And it's just such a magical and important, I think, part of our practice as humans. And I know many of the practitioners that we're increasingly connecting with through the Y on Earth community make breath work a very central part of their own personal day-to-day practice. So I'm hoping maybe you can tell us just a little more about what is the didgeridoo and what's this whole thing about circular breathing?
Yeah, the didgeridoo, it's such a huge topic, but it's the perfect segue into sound as the universal Om, or the sound, not a Brahma, the sound of the Creator. The oldest mandala in the world, the Sri Yantra, is represented as this kind of almost like this structure, fractalized, and it's the sound of Om.
Yes.
And it's basically Om is considered to be the sound of the Creator, or the modern physics call it like background radiation of the Big Bang, the creation. It's a vibration, but it's out of this coherent frequency. It's like a field. Everything emerges. Everything is vibration. Differing levels of it's like a fractal, but it's the ultimate fractal of sound. Even light is a frequency. When we refer to sound, it's a little confusing because we think of sound as auditory. But the spectrum of frequency in the cosmos, I mean, the auditory is just like a hair in this infinite, bandwidth of frequency. What we can hear is like 20 to 20,000 hertz is the average frequency. I actually hear above and below the hearing range of 20 to 20,000. There are many of us, but it's a form of clairaudience that I've had that only amplified. I've had since a child, but normally we just hear in a pretty limited bandwidth. But everything is sound, and the didgeridoo is the perfect example of that. It's one note. There might be different keys depending on the length of the pipe, or the diameter, or the density of the material. But it doesn't really matter. It's a monochord, actually. I actually had a dream. I had studied Socrates and Plato in high school. I had a great philosophy teacher. And one of the things that Socrates said, Socrates and Plato and this whole school of Greek teachings of the cosmos was based in geometry and sound, and how everything is emanating out of that. And Socrates said something that always stuck with me. He said, study the monochord and you will discover the secrets of creation. So what is the monochord? The way he demoed it was like a string with guitars have frets. And so a monochord is just a string with a secured on either side. And the length of the string and what it's made out of, its diameter and everything would affect what note it was. But the monochord didn't matter the note, the fact that it was one note. So I had this dream shortly after learning the didgeridoo, where it came into my life, that the didgeridoo was a monochord. It's a pipe, basically, and there's an entry and an exit point. So it's basically one note, and the string, instead of a physical string, it's your breath, is the string. And it's amplifying the vibration of your breath, made audible. And so I was like, wow, study the monochord and you'll discover the secrets of creation. Well, I have to say the didgeridoo has been one of my greatest teachers, top two. The other is a little bunny that's in my life, a little rabbit. Funny teachers either come in unexpected forms and at times of life when we need them. But the Aboriginals, which have carried forth in Australia this instrument at least 150,000 years. It's the oldest instrument we know of, older than the drum at least, as far as records can tell, and maybe older than that. They said that the didgeridoo was the sound of basically the dream time, which is where we go when we die and where we come from before we're born. And it's this field of information that we can tap into with that sound and commune with our ancestors. Ancestors live there. It kind of reminds me of Ava, in Avatar.
Yes, right.
This tree of soul, you commune with this place where we go. And I was like, yeah, when I died, I really feel that it taps me. When I had my near death, and then I heard that sound, it was like, oh, this is a tool for accessing that realm. And what I realized that when I play, and I've actually been involved in some research where they measure the brain waves, so you're wearing this thing, and there are some feedback devices where you can learn how to control your brain waves. There's like alpha we're most of the time we're in beta, which is like every day walking around consciousness. There's a bandwidth like 12 to 14 hertz, and then there's alpha, which is like 8 to 12 hertz. So we go into meditative. Then there's theta, it's kind of in between sleep. And then there's delta, which is kind of dreamless, deep sleep. Very slow brainwaves. And there's other brainwaves, those are the main ones. But then there's a new one of the new ones is called gamma. And they were studying Tibetan monks who could go into this brainwave state when they were in very deep states of meditation. Mm-hmm. And it's like above 40 hertz. And then there's ones above that, but that's kind of the one that this device was measuring. It could measure. And so you can see there's like a little ball that goes up, goes down, and you try to regulate the brain waves by having the feedback on the screen of what your brain is doing. Couldn't touch the gamma. But when I played the gamma, the little ball went all the way to the top. Like there's just like a spiraling ball as the visual. And I couldn't touch it, and then I stopped playing and it would go back down.
Wow.
But I was like, gamma. And so what I realized with the didgeridoo is that when I'm playing it, it puts me in a state of consciousness that I very much like.
Yes.
That I wish I always said, the only problem with the didge now is that I just want to be playing it all the time, walking around. But I think it is a tool to learn how to reference a certain state of consciousness and then live it. Part of it has to do with your breathing. You need to be embodying your spirit.
Right.
But you're in training. There's a word in sound therapy that we use, and that entrainment is entrainment's happening all the time. Like women who live together start to menstruate together. Or you hear music and you just can't help moving. That's a form of entrainment, but it's also a very physical phenomenon. Things in the room, like pendulum clocks, will all, if there's a bunch in the room, they'll all end up synchronizing.
Yeah.
And entrainment is going on with everything all the time. We're entraining to the moon and all the planets have effects. That's a form of astrology. And so when you're listening to music, your brain waves actually entrain to the sounds. So some of this album has, a lot of albums have binaural beats, which are kind of not audible, but they're in the background, and you can set them in the frequency range of delta or theta or alpha, or whatever you choose, and then you encode it in the music, and it helps your brain to kind of go into these relaxed, expanded states. So that's one of the physics principles behind why sound is therapeutic, why the didgeridoo, for me it was a teacher to understand what is it like to be in these really expanded states of consciousness. I had that in my near death, but I didn't know how to embody it. One of the things I was shown is I'm not even in my body. Part of it was I wasn't breathing. I was a very shallow breather. Many people are very shallow breathers. It is a real discipline to learn how to breathe.
Right.
It's a lifelong discipline. Yeah. And so I actually have been teaching workshops in the didgeridoo for about 20 years, but I don't teach it as a musical instrument. I teach it as the ultimate embodying tool. This is not, you may never play it for anybody else. It's not a performance instrument. I mean, you can play it like I do with group sound sessions, but I have people lie down. It's not a performance. This is a journey. Yeah. The Aboriginals used it as a way of communing with ancestors, or healing the earth, or playing the song of the different regions to send. They saw themselves as caregivers of the planet. So they're playing the didgeridoo as an act of communion for Gaia, for this earth. So that's how I teach it.
We might say most of our indigenous ancestors all around the planet understood on some level the critical role of caregiving and caretaking of our planet. And I want to make sure we'll connect back to that dot in a little bit in the conversation. And I wanted to articulate that because it's one of the themes we find ourselves turning to fairly often.
Yeah.
How important it is for each of us to understand that part of our own heritage, wherever our people may come from on the planet, that indigeneity is something we all share on some level.
Yeah. Yeah, and in all cultures, I use Native American songs and flutes and aboriginals, Tibetan, any culture that I've studied, I'm like, I resonate with you. I love this about you. And all their music, it's a universal language with different flavors, but it's all the one. It's all the same thing that all religions, all beings. I mean, that was what the near death showed me. Is like everything is one. This is not a concept. This is like something you just know,
right?
And you will not forget.
True.
But how to live in this world of apparent separation, where we seem separate bodies, and where everything, it's just the nature of third dimension duality. It's a stage, but it's a challenge. But that's why I love music, because it's a universal language. Like you can really, I might not speak all these other languages, and people might dress different or have different, cultural practices or different kinds of foods. But when you listen to the music from any culture, something in you gets it. Yeah. Even though it's different, it's like, yeah, I get that. This is a language that animals understand. All animals understand music. So for me, after my near death, it was like the perfect, and the didgeridoo totally opened my path. I was like, make me an instrument creator. And then this came in, and I'm like, oh, I am the instrument. Yeah. And I learned about St. Francis. I'm like, these are my people, Right. Start to see that all these different mystics have had similar visions and experiences, different ways of saying it. And we just got to find our way. So, music became my way to stay connected to spirit. And then it turned into like, people, if I go on this ride, when I play, I'm not here to entertain. I'm here to commune. Yeah. Because that's what we're all seeking. And then if I can just stay in that space and there's other people around, they can go with me. And I realized that and I started to study the ancient history of music therapy, and I mean, that's how it was designed. Music wasn't not designed, but the cultures used it for midwiving birth, for midwiving death, for communion with the earth, for healing, very deep healing practices, like real healing. But it wasn't about the musician being the healer. The musician is like a minister. And a minister, the real role in my mind of the minister is an intermediary, messenger. Right. And I'm 0° Gemini, so that's like Hermes, right? The Caduceus. He is the messenger of the gods. But he's the messenger. It's not his message. Right. It's not like, I'm going to heal you. That's why this CD is self-healing with sound and music. I'm not going to heal you with my sound. I'm going to commune because this is my dharma. And if it helps your consciousness to expand to a place where you can go out and affect your own healing. Because I feel like conscious expansion, like ayahuasca can do, or now they've decriminalized mushrooms, in the right set and setting, different tools or techniques can expand our consciousness where we heal ourselves. You cut your finger, a doctor can address it, put, healing balm on it, but you're going to heal that finger with time and from the inside.
One of the things I'd love to dive a little deeper into has to do with these different frequencies, and we've used the term hertz a few times, and I'm sure many of our audience knows it, is familiar with it, but I want to point out hertz means cycles per second, basically. So we know that our cells are vibrating at different cycles. We know that all of the light spectrum, from visible, which we can all see, to things like radio waves, infrared, ultraviolet, all of these are basically different frequencies, right? And we also know that in the ancient Mediterranean region around Greek, Roman amphitheaters, when they were doing performances, they would often place specially designed vases with water in them throughout the audience to help amplify the resonance. And one of the interesting things, of course, is that this connection between frequency and water. We are mostly water, 72% or thereabouts. And of course, living creatures, whether they're mountain lions or little bunnies or ferns or giant redwoods or blue whales or microalgae and other microorganisms, we are all made of water, and life is where water is. So I'm wondering if we can dive a bit into these different frequencies, especially that 432 hertz and that 528 hertz, and what that might mean for our healing work for our own bodies, and potentially even for other parts of our living planet ecosystems and so forth. I know that's a lot, so maybe we start with 432 so we've got all these different instruments tuned to different frequencies, right? And our ancient roots, it seems many cultures were aware, cognizant of different frequencies having healing properties and so forth. And so the tuning and the use of certain frequencies is apparently of great importance.
Huge topic. Well, I think we can discuss a way to bring those two together, which I think water and this topic can be related. So we did this movie, I co-produced and scored, Secret of Water.
Yeah.
And this, if you see on the cover, this it's a kind of perfect geometrical water molecule frozen, and then the flower of life, part of the flower of life design superimposed.
Which is a sacred geometric design.
Yes, and here's another,
so
we have a little mini, but this is actually not just a two-dimensional, this is a three and beyond multi-dimensional form of what I see. The way I see it is it's coherent structure. And so water, when it's healthy, they have found, like water that is from a pristine spring or that's been prayed into or has been structured with some kind of coherent harmonic frequency versus like anger or hate or pollution. Water exposed to that will not crystallize usually, or it doesn't, it forms distorted crystals, but very coherently structured water with sound, with prayer, with different things can structure water. Healthy earth area,
healthy ecosystems.
Ecosystem.
Yeah.
And so, which is interesting because in the Vedic tradition with the chakra system, the geometry of the heart chakra is also this structure. And so the way I see the heart chakra, why that's important is basically generating your field. Like the earth has a magnetic field that goes up and goes down inside. And also Nassim Haramein, who is a friend of ours and I've worked with, I've studied his material in relation to this, is showing that space, when it's coherently structured, has a similar, this kind of infinite flower of life. It's like everything is full with this geometry, not just the things we see, space, water, and we, through consciousness and intention, with harmony or discord. And so can water, and sound can be a tool to align us with this harmony of the universe. The things that we associate with elevated states of consciousness, when we feel oneness with all of life, or near-death experience, when we go back to the mind of God, these are, or we know what it's like to not be in coherence and feel depression or anger or fear. These are all vibrations. They're consciousness states, but they are ultimately vibrations that are not coherent. And so the power of, and the other thing about the center of the heart chakra is, I believe that, you know, where north, so in third dimension we have polarity, which creates movement and all of the forms we see. That's how cells divide. That's my background, molecular biology. That's how cells divide. Duality. It's not bad. There is no bad or good. They're actually two sides of the same coin of seen from the higher dimensions. That's the gift of expanded states, where you get out of polarity and you can reframe reality from that. Problems cannot be solved on the same level of thinking or consciousness that created them. So if you have a problem, if you need healing, the planet, there's no bad or good. There's only experience. And we can polarize, but that traps us in samsara, in Buddhist. It's aversion craving. It's polarity, but it's not, it's a place to learn about that experience. But then we keep going. We keep evolving, ideally, over however many lives. But the place in the heart, there's this place where north becomes south. And they're right in the middle of them, which I think Nassim was saying there might be a black hole there. Might be black holes everywhere, which is a white hole in another dimension maybe. It's like a birth into a higher dimension. That's how I took it in. But it's like, it's a portal to non-duality, to higher states of consciousness.
Yeah.
And so the beauty of this, coming back to this geometry, this coherent geometry, is in the center of this, what Buckminster Fuller also called the vector equilibrium, is the center of this perfect geometry. It's the most stable structure there is. It's not polarized, but it's also a doorway to the higher dimensions, which is where I feel healing happens and consciousness expansion happens, and that's what we're all seeking through music, through healing, through our life experience here. And so structuring water with coherent sound, which is fueled by intention. So the consciousness rides, it can be a beautiful sound, but if it's created by a machine that doesn't have a heart or intention, I don't think it's going to have the same effect as being created by a human.
Right.
And it may not be a perfect sound, or you may sing something, but it's not like you're not an operatic perfect singer, but your consciousness can ride that frequency. And that is, the consciousness and the sound together have the effect. And so that's the importance of water, how when we do sound therapy or we're being affected by frequencies, we're mostly water. Actually, everything alive, our bodies, the earth, pretty much same proportions, all living things. I mean, minerals are alive, and so everything is alive, but the things that we're mostly interacting with, plants and animals.
With the DNA.
DNA doesn't work without water. It's all in the water. So if we can structure that harmonically, we're going to achieve what we're looking for. And so how it ties into the 432, there's a lot of controversy in the sound community of what's the perfect, tuning. And many, many years, I have a whole section on my website on 432 of all the research, and then people say, there's just a lot of disagreements on.
Sure.
But my experience with 432 is that, so 432 is referring to the note A.
Right.
And it's maybe more technical than we need to go into, but if you're in music, all the other notes in the scale are calculated relative to A. This is how we do it now.
And that's the A above middle C on a piano, or below, or close to middle C?
Above middle C.
Above middle C, yeah.
Yeah, and then, and I don't think the ancients maybe did it quite this way. I think they were tuning more in other ways.
Sure.
They didn't have little digital tuners and stuff.
Right.
However, and that's cycles per second. So then there's an equation, a number that you multiply 432, or 440 is what the standard tuning is. Some people say that was changed recently by the Nazi regime to 440, but before that, the Stradivarius violin, which is the most finely tuned instrument in the world, is tuned to 432. And when I get indigenous instruments that aren't tuned precisely, some are, these days, they make them in 440, so you can play with other musicians, you're all in the same tuning. But if they're not, and they're tuned kind of by ear, or more by indigenous people, or the didgeridoos, they're pretty much, most of the instruments I get are in 432, naturally. Or if I pick up a guitar and I just tune it by ear, and then I tune it later with digital, it's in 432. We had a piano that I grew up learning on. It was an upright. And my parents hadn't tuned it in like 20 years, right? So I was telling them, hey, I've been studying 432. When you have it tuned, we put our piano here in 432 in Colorado. They're in Arizona. Why don't you have the guy put in 432 if you're going to have it tuned, just so the grandkids can play on it? And the guy came over, and it was in 432.
Wow.
It had settled into
That's
432.
what you were playing, yeah. That's so beautiful.
So the idea is that, there's in ancient structures like Teotihuacan and the Great Pyramid of Giza, and many of these megalithic sites that were probably created by sound, actually, plus consciousness. There's a lot of writings in there, the writings we have, a lot of these didn't they were oral traditions, but a lot of these cultures refer to sound as how they created things we can't even replicate today. We cannot replicate the Great Pyramid or Temple of Baalbek and all of these like megalithic, huge stone structures, totally precisely aligned.
Yeah.
If you measure certain dimensions in the relative height or length of the buildings or their halls or relative to each other, they're usually harmonically structured, almost all of them are, and 432 is a recurring pattern, recurring number. And if you calculate the other notes relative to 432, they all come out to whole numbers. But if you use 440, you get these endlessly repeating fractalized, digital digits repeating numbers. So it's kind of like it's not I see 440 is not a coherent frequency. It's kind of like our calendar isn't totally tuned to the cosmic,
the rhythms that are real.
They're a little off. There are.
That's why we have leap year and things like that.
Leap year, and it doesn't really account for the moons very well, and and no one pays attention to solstices and equinoxes.
More and more.
Not nobody, But so the way I see it is everything is vibration. Everything is harmonics. If you're in coherence. And so why not align our consciousness with the coherence of the cosmos? With nature, which is already the way the Fibonacci and the golden mean and all these sacred geometrical forms of how nature is structured. And our bodies too, the proportions of our bodies, like the Vitruvian Man.
Which Da Vinci drew.
We are structured. It's just because we have free will. We can choose, which is a learning. I see it's all perfect, even that. We can choose to be out of harmony with the cosmos. But if we've learned that lesson, however many lives or whatever, or enough pain in this life, let's use the tools we have to harmonize ourselves with the cosmos. And certain kinds of frequencies, coupled with certain kinds of consciousness, and sometimes the ancient people used plant medicines who could help shift your consciousness out of the material mode of the small bandwidth that we're usually focused on for a little while. And then align ourselves with the cosmos, with the harmony of the spheres. The planets make a vibration and a frequency. They actually make geometrical patterns in their relative cycles to us and each other. Everything is vibration. So this is a tool, and 432, for me, there's too many things that as I've studied it, it's much more in tune with the cosmic patterning of this flower of life, of the geometries of nature, than any other frequency that I've studied. However, I think that we can transcend the limitations of, because then there's this, what it comes down to, what I've been thinking about lately is like, who determines what a second is? 432 is cycles per second. Is a second like part of like a division, or is it arbitrary, like a mile or a meter, or how we divide space is kind of a man-made thing. In nature, like the Fibonacci, it's about relative, like a fractal, like the way things are relative to each other. It's all symbiosis, right? Everything is harmonically related to each other. It's not necessarily about the unit. So I started to think, well, 432 is cycles per second. So what if a second is an accurate division? So what transcends all of this mind stuff? Because you can get, people are like, oh, it's, the Len Horowitz has this thing about the, I'm forgetting there's another, the solfeggio. People are all solfeggio teaching, it's different philosophies, and then people fight about them, and they defend. And anything that does that, I'm like, there's a bigger picture here. And what I think the bigger picture is consciousness. You can use 440, and if you're playing it with so much love and so much intention, I think it can overcome the limitation. Ultimately, everything's a placebo too. If you study the placebo effect, it's like the mind and the belief can override any physical limitations. Like why can certain yogis drink poison and not die? Well, if we went to the physics behind it, it would be impossible.
Mm-hmm.
So we can overcome any limitation, including attuning with consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
But, back to the heart, it's like if we're coming from this place of like, what is our intention with anything you do? But when I create the sound, when I play the didgeridoo or a flute, am I playing because I want you to think I'm great? Or I want to make money off this? Or because this is my way to commune with the cosmos, and I hope that it helps others.
It's so
Truly.
beautiful.
It's
So
just, that's
beautiful.
what's more important than the sound itself.
One of the things that strikes me is there's in the medieval tradition and even the ancient tradition of Western education, mystery schools, is this body of subjects called the quadrivium that includes geometry, music, astronomy, and math, arithmetic. And it's all about pattern and frequency, and it's so amazing to be able to perceive these interconnections and these patterns showing up all over the place. Of course, Pythagoras was all about this, as was Da Vinci many centuries later. With the work we're doing at Why on Earth, including this coming summit that we're hosting May 17th to 19th, we do a lot of that heart connection with intention, with water and with living biology in special compost preparations in the biodynamic tradition to help activate and even heal soil ecology, forest ecology, gardens, farms. And that connection of that heart is so important. Any of us who might have a practice of prayer in whatever tradition will know that connection of heart is perhaps difficult to describe sometimes, but so essential. And we're living in a time when there is a profound need for healing in our own selves, our own bodies, our minds, our emotional bodies, and in our living biosphere. And it seems one of the things we can be doing a lot more of is connecting with heart and collaborating with microbiome when it comes to soil, and doing this kind of healing work. So we'll be exploring and sharing this kind of experience together at the summit, which is coming up. It's massively mobilizing sustainability, deep leadership for the 21st century. If you go to whyonearth.org, you'll see a link to the page that has a short video about the summit, as well as our speaker lineup. It's going to be amazing. And I also want to, before I forget, mention that all of our audience can download our ebook and audiobook resources for free using the code MOBILIZE. That's also at whyonearth.org. And with the summit and with this podcast series, I want to thank our sponsors. That includes Patagonia, Equal Exchange, the Association of Waldorf Schools of North America, the International Society of Sustainability Professionals, Purium, Waylay Waters, the Lidge Family Foundation, and Earth Coast Productions. So thank you to all of you for supporting our stewardship and sustainability podcast series, as well as our upcoming summit, massively mobilizing sustainability. And today we have the great pleasure and privilege of visiting with Kimba Arem, and we are talking about the healing power of sound as it relates to water and as it relates to life. And you can find more about Kimba's work at a handful of websites. We've got radiancehealth.com, and I'll put all of this in the show notes. secretofwaterthemovie.com, that's about the movie that Kimba referred to earlier. And how do you pronounce this? G-A-Earth? Ga-Earth?
Gaia-Earth.
Gaia-Earth.
G-A-E-A is the old
The
spelling,
old spelling
of
Gaia.
And then
Oh,
Earth, so
interesting.
the old and the new.
Oh, beautiful. I didn't know that. So it's Gaia-Earth, Gaearth.com. And I am so excited that part of what we're going to do today is we get to hear some of this amazing sound and music that you create, Kimba. And I thought if you'd like, we might do a little segue into sharing some of that. And we can continue talking too while you're getting everything.
Do you want to start with the flute?
Sure. So what is this? This is one of the most amazing instruments. I just got to hear it a little bit ago before we started recording, and I tell you, it is celestial.
This is I just call it a 4-chamber flute. It's a one of a kind. They're not in production as far as I know anymore, but this was made when I was living on Kauai. A man who was I lived up on Kahuna Road, and he lived at the end of the road in this little bamboo forest for a while and was making these crazy instruments. He just invented this.
Wow.
And he burned these, Mandelbrot type fractal
amazing.
images. This is all done by hand.
It's a beautiful, beautiful.
So basically one hole and then 4 chambers. So I call it the 4-chamber flute.
And we've got a slight reverb set up here, so we're going to have a little bit of additional digital fun layered into this, but the layerings of sound coming from the instrument itself are just fabulous, magnificent.
All right. So.
That's so beautiful. Wow. Wow, wow, wow.
So why don't we do, these are some didgeridoos, but this is one one of the crystal ones I designed.
Mm-hmm.
It's made out of quartz crystal, and it's kind of mapped off the way that the tapering of one of my wooden ones, because we tried some models that were not like the Fibonacci kind of the way that nature grows things, and they didn't sound right. But when we finally modeled nature, came out pretty well. So, and I usually play this with a matching key in the crystal. Oh, there's a little spider in here. Well, he'll get some
He's
sound
about
therapy.
to get a concert.
And a little baby. Okay. So I have to play these together.
Thank you so much. That is exquisite. Oh,
Should we play the water fountain?
yes, please. Please, please. Oh.
That one is fun. Another kind of one of a kind, not in production anymore, instruments. So there's water in the bottom here.
Mm-hmm.
And these are the harmonics of the metal rods vibrating into the water and being amplified in through here.
And friends, I want to share, I know that many of you are familiar with the experiences of sound baths and sound healing, and I surmise there are probably a number of you out there who haven't yet experienced this. And if you have the opportunity, wherever you may be, to experience sound bath and or sound healing, I highly encourage it. It is tremendous. It's wonderful.
I'll be doing one next Friday for WESEC.
Beautiful.
Yeah,
right.
in the space. We do them maybe, once a month or so.
And what time is that?
5:30.
5:30. Oh my goodness. We're
Yeah.
going to be ending, that's day one of our summit. It will be ending a little past that time, so I think folks in this case may have to do either or, but it's...
we can connect energetically.
Yes,
we're doing the same thing.
Absolutely.
All right, so... Do you have a feeling for it?
That is amazing. I mean, it's so ethereal, and there's a very mysterious element to that one.
Yeah, that's usually the part of the sound journey when people are have gone out more from the earth into the cosmic,
Yes.
like interstellar
Yeah.
atmosphere.
Yeah.
That's where that fits in. It's kind of not the sounds we're used to hearing.
Right.
But my feeling about sound, why it's nourishing, is we are multidimensional beings, and we need food, or we think we need food. It's part of our experience here, but we get fed on many levels.
Yeah.
Feeding isn't just the physical.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel that when we lived in nature more, when we didn't have cars and walls and 60 cycle hertz frequency surrounding us,
Right.
and EMFs and
Mhm.
4G and 5G,
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of frequencies we're surrounded by that are kind of not necessarily harmonic,
Yes.
and they're man-made,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of the frequencies are not natural, in the sense that nature, the waterfall or the birds singing or the wind in the trees, these are things that feed us. So when we go into nature, we feel good because we're actually getting fed.
Mm.
And on these subtle levels, our emotional and mental body and beyond anything we can describe.
Yeah.
So my experience with working with, I love harmonic based, like this has a lot of overtones. And there's and the didgeridoo, the crystal, has a lot of harmonics, or the water. And these are frequencies we don't necessarily hear very much, but there's something in it that's nourishing us, that's feeding our subtle bodies. And that's partly healing. Like if you're starving and you eat nutritious food, it heals your body.
Right.
Or food can be medicine, but
Absolutely.
food isn't just physical.
Yeah.
And I also feel we're moving into a phase on the planet, because all the planets are speeding up their frequencies. It's not just global warming. There's a frequency increase, which includes consciousness. People are waking up, but we need to be nourished more by the subtle. That's
Yes.
why I think homeopathy,
Right.
or subtle energies, light, aromatherapy, mental healing, emotional healing is as important as our physical. But as we go into higher frequencies on the planet, those will become more important to attend to, because we're becoming less dense.
Yeah.
Our bodies are just such a small portion of who we are. And so I think sound therapy and all the tools that we use that are subtle, or subtle energy based, or attending to the higher harmonics of the physical, is everything is structured, in the universe is structured with octaves and harmonics.
Yeah.
We're just it's just part of the evolution.
Beautiful. It's such a marvelous and exquisite time to be alive. We are, on the one hand, able to learn so much and synthesize so much from different cultures and eras. On the other hand, our science is getting fairly advanced to the point where we're starting to really be able to see things like the crystalline structure in water, the various brain waves and frequencies being affected by music and breathing. And it just, as we're waking up, as we're learning together, I think it opens incredible opportunities for enhanced health and well-being as individuals, households, families, neighborhoods, and of course, healing at the planetary scale, stewardship, sustainability, regeneration. And it's, Kimba, just such a delight to have some time with you today and to be able to dive into some of this and share some of this with our audience. And my hope is in the coming months we'll have a lot more opportunities for collaboration and cross-pollination. And for those of us who are particularly living in the urban landscapes, I think it's so important to develop a deeper practice, not only of the breathing, but of also getting into those natural environments and connecting with sound and music deliberately. And that's going to be part of what enhances our vitality, enhances our health, really, as we do our great work in the world. And Kimba, as I often ask our guests, I do want to ask you if there's anything else you'd like to share with our audience before we sign off for today. I want to give you that opportunity, and what a joy to do this with you.
No, I'm just grateful to share, and what I feel, if anything, when I had my near-death experience, it wasn't like I was shown this is what your life is going to be, but but I was shown a way to find my way in the world that I could be happy and bring happiness to others. And that might not be like a vocation. Like for me, it turned out to be sound, but other things too. And that will change over time, the form of the expression. But it's really coming from this place of centeredness in the heart. And that is my prayer, that, you know, like if I do a sound journey, or if someone listens to a CD, or my intention is that because I was given this gift to tap into that frequency of consciousness, that's like Joseph Campbell said, every culture in the world story, the teaching of their story is follow your heart. And what does that look like? You know, I mean, it doesn't mean I am a sound therapist. I still don't even know what I'm going to be when I grow up. Yeah. I'm just living from this place, and that's what the indigenous people teach us. And that's what I hope that the vibration, as I tap into, I'm doing what I love, that people can tap into. They don't go, oh, wow, you're so great. But then what, you know, people do this separation thing. It's like, activate, okay, we're all the one, and we're all meant to operate from this place. That's what forms this geometry, is the center of each of our hearts is this coherent geometry that I believe if everybody starts to live from that place, we will tap into a new coherent frequency on the planet. Like in the cymatics, they talk about, you know, the water or the vibration creates geometries, and then it starts to increase on frequency, and it goes into this chaos period, which is where we're at now. We're not in a new frequency yet. And then it goes to a new, higher, more complex geometry. Right. Which is really higher dimension. But I feel like that's where we're at now. We're on this precipice of humanity tapping into a new geometry of how we relate to each other, which I think will be a lot like the bees, but a higher order of that. You know, the way the bees, and which is a similar structure of their hives, there's some universal, coherent, multidimensional fractal geometry of God. The geometry of divinity, my partner says, is what God means. And I feel that that's our work, the great work, the alchemical work. Carl Jung talked about it's the transmutation of this base material of the physical 3D experience. It's a compost, you know, the soil, right? Is compost dirty isn't bad. Right. It's just, you know, we've gone through this period of dirt is bad, and we've polarized the feminine, dirty, earth, and really it's just compost. It's a stage of the soul's evolution of an individual and a group. The collective humanity, we're all one. And I know this, even though I might not get along with everybody. I might not even want to be in the same room with a lot of them, but I know we're all one. Yeah. It doesn't, that's just my ego personality resonating, or, you know, but I know this, and that's what we're meant to become, is like a group mind, but not like drums, not like the Greys or some kind of fearful, or the Borgs in Star Trek. You know, it's not like that. We have personality, but we are meant to operate as a unity. Like every cell in our body, this is another molecular biology background. Every cell in our body works with every other cell harmoniously, exchanging information and energy and materials. But it's all part of the one body. There's heart cells, there's liver cells, there's skin, there's infinite complexity, nervous system, blood. We're like that in the body of Gaia, you know, and we're part of this planet. We're not some kind of parasite, or, I mean, I think we might have a virus, but it doesn't mean we are the virus. Right. Bodies can get viruses, but the viruses teach the immune system to go to a higher order of complexity. There's a gift in the virus. That's why you don't want to do immunizations, because your body needs to learn how, through this crisis, the opportunity for change and a higher order of complexity. And I think that's what we're facing, rather than polarized, oh, the Illuminati and good and evil, and there's crazy people and there's war. It's like, no, we're here to evolve. We're all the one. We're all God. Really. You know, even the virus. You know, even if it seems evil. But this is the model of staying in our hearts, doing what we're here to do, which might change over time. It's not a vocation. Like Eckhart talks as primary purpose, be who you are, be beautiful, be you to the fullest. And together we all create this new geometry of what we're meant to become, and nobody is better than anybody else. No matter what position you have, how much money, how beautiful you are, there is no hierarchy in the universe. There's different structuring, but we can operate with such humility and unity and symbiosis, then I see that happen in my life, and to live that as much as I'm able. But it's a work in progress for all of us,
Truly. Well, thank you so much, Kimba. It's so wonderful to be with you today.
Thank you. Mahalo.
Beautiful.
I hope to all our relations.
The Why on Earth Community Stewardship and Sustainability podcast series is hosted by Aaron William Perry, author, thought leader, and executive consultant. The podcast and video recordings are made possible by the generous support of people like you. To sign up as a daily, weekly, or monthly supporter, please visit whyonearth.org/support. Support packages start at just $1 per month. The podcast series is also sponsored by several corporate and organization sponsors. You can get discounts on their products and services using the code WHYONEARTH, all one word with a Y. These sponsors are listed on the whyonearth.org/support page. If you found this particular podcast episode especially insightful, informative, or inspiring, please pass it on and share it with a friend whom you think will also enjoy it. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for your support. And thank you for being a part of the Why on Earth community.